Screentime Stories is presented by Pinwheel. Pinwheel gives kids and teens a smartphone experience that actually supports healthy development. I'm Julie, and as a parent, I know that embracing technology today is a must. Our kids will log on whether we like it or not. So let's lean into the challenges and joys of parenting with tech by learning from the latest research and experts in the field. This is Screentime Stories, parenting techniques for raising tech natives. Let's figure this out together. Today is our last episode of Season 2, and we're closing out the season with a final dose of wisdom from a former police sergeant who now dedicates his time to teaching kids and parents about online safety. Clayton Cranford is the owner of Cyber Safety Cop and a 20-year law enforcement veteran. He's one of the nation's leading law enforcement educators on social media, child safety, and behavioral threat assessments. He's also the author of Parenting in the Digital World, a really comprehensive book. Hi, Clay. Thanks for joining me today.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Can you tell me a bit about yourself?
Yeah, so my name is Clay Cranford. I'm a former sergeant with the Orange County Sheriff's Department. I worked in law enforcement for 20 years, and the best part of my career was working with students as a school resource officer. I was a juvenile investigator, and I was on our countywide behavioral threat assessment team. And all that means is I spent a lot of time going to a lot of schools, hundreds of them, talking to students, helping their parents and the educators, mostly revolving around things happening online on their mobile devices in their digital world. And I should also mention I'm a parent. I have two boys who are now just off to college. But back when I was a school resource officer, 2012 and later, they were very much in social media and devices. So I was kind of living the life that parents are dealing with, right, with kids and technology. So I have a very personal experiences as a parent, kind of dealing with this stuff too. But yeah, so when I was a school resource officer, I really saw my role as an educator, as a mentor to students, and so now, and actually, what happened was I created a digital, safety presentation for students, internet safety presentation for parents, and I was doing that in my city, and then there really wasn't anybody with that message, my message, reaching kids and parents, and so. Over time, people from other cities outside my jurisdiction heard about me coming to my driving hours to see me speak in my city. They started saying, "Well, will you come to our city and wherever outside of my jurisdiction? Will you chat with our parents? We talk to our students." And so, it kind of organically turned into this business that over the last 8 years has grown. And now, when I retired last year, I'm really. It's my passion, which was what I enjoyed most about being a school resource officer was talking to students and being that mentor and that educator. So now I travel throughout the United States, doing just that. And I'm actually have instructors who work with me to do this. So we're trying to kind of expand throughout the United States with this message.
How often do you speak to kids at these assemblies?
Nearly every day, actually. Me or one of my instructors nearly every day are speaking to students K through 12 and their parents, typically in the evening. Yeah. So there's a great need, for this message, the way we talk to kids and their parents, kind of equip, making more resilient children, and making more equipped parents is kind of our mission.
Well, tell me more about going back to when you were a school resource officer. What made you go from that position to what you do now?
Well, it all started on my first day as a school resource officer. I walked to my main school in my city. It was a middle school of 1,400 students. And literally my first day I walked in and the front desk person saw me and she greeted me. She said, "Deputy Cranford, we're so glad you're here." But she didn't say that. She said it more like, "Deputy Cranford, we're so glad you're here." She was definitely concern, she said, there's a student back in the counseling office that you need to talk to. And I'm like, wow, it's my first day and school hasn't even started yet. So I go back there and I find this 7th grade, 12-year-old girl curled up, crying uncontrollably. There in the counseling office. Counselor was, sitting by and trying to comfort her. And what I learned was that this 12-year-old girl over the summer, she had her then 6th grade boyfriend asked her to send him a nude image. And she did because she cared about him. And I think for a lot of kids, it's expected. There's a lot of pressure to do that. And she did. And predictably, like all 6th grade relationships, they end, and they broke up over the summer. And literally the night before her first day at this school, she started getting text messages from boys at that school saying, send us nudes, because her ex-boyfriend had shared this image of her with them. So there she is walking into her first day of school, and she didn't get very far. She went right into the counselor's office, broke down. So, my first day as a school resource officer was very educational for me. There I am sitting with these boys. Luckily, they were all at that school, making them all take out their phones and deleting the image, and say, hey, this read in the right act. And that was back before the cloud. So when you deleted something off your phone, I think there was an expectation that it was probably truly gone, but you never know for sure. And then we start calling in parents, giving them the bad news, what happened that day. And the last parent I talked to was her parent. And when her parent came in, I explained what happened, and she was completely blindsided. She had no idea that this was going on, that she didn't even know about this boy. She didn't know this was even her, quote unquote boyfriend.
Well, it's absolutely crazy that you tell that story, because we kicked off season 2 with a middle school teacher's account of a similar scenario. I think as parents, we have to realize our childhoods were different. We had film in our cameras, and the process of sending a nude would have involved asking a real human to process our photo, and postage stamps. There wasn't much room for impulsivity. So I think the kids that send nudes today are good kids. They're our kids. I want to make sure we talk to our kids about the reality here and to help them avoid making those impulsive decisions that they'll regret. So, Clay, what happened next?
She asked me a really important question. She said, how do I keep this from happening again? So it was that question that really put me on this path, that and really every other day after that was kind of a version of that day to some degree, coming up with a solution for parents so that they could better mentor their children in the digital world. I really see it as a mentorship kind of issue. And because their kids are going to get it sooner or later. So you just need to prepare your kids so they can operate in that place safely and be resilient, because they're going to run into problems and they need to know what to do, and they know who to talk to. And they only know that if a parent sits down with them and has that conversation. And then talking to students and having, kind of bridging the gap between what they know and what they do. There's a bit of a disconnect there. And talking to students, we do, like I said, we do assemblies K through 12, but the K through 3 is really, we're talking to kids about being safe and kind online. It was a presentation that I never thought I would have to do. In fact, we didn't used to do it up until about, 5 or 6 years ago. Schools were asking for it, and I said, why? Why would I talk to a kindergartner about social media, about the internet? And they're like, well, they all have phones. So when I go into these, elementary schools, and I have these cute little K through 3 guys coming in, they sit down, crisscross applesauce, in the NPR, and they're looking up at me all excited. They're in an assembly. And I always start off with saying, raise your hand if you have your own phone, not your parents' phone, but you have a phone. Half of the hands go up. And then I ask, well, who has Instagram, Snapchat, or TikTok? Usually TikTok. Half of those hands go up. So, excuse me. So nearly a quarter of all those kids have social media of some kind where they're sharing. And then lastly, I say, well, who plays an online game where you play with other people you don't know? All the hands go up. So they're all playing Minecraft. They're playing Roblox. And when I tell a parent like, hey, if your child's on Roblox or Minecraft, they may be playing or communicating with somebody they don't know. And parents are like, what, really? So, and then of course, when we get to the 4 through 6, we're talking about, more kind of mature concepts. And when we get into the middle and high school, we start talking about sexual exploitation and sexting and all that. But we do it in a way where we really kind of challenge the way they think about these things, and in a way that we're not talking down to them. And we found that doing that has been really powerful. We have kids who come out of those presentations changed. And that's our goal for parents too. We want to change the way parents think about their child's digital world and encourage them to be a part of it. And there's some hurdles for parents. Part of that is just kind of their perceptions. Like they think, I didn't grow up with the internet. I don't know how to do this. So my job is to say, well, number one, you can absolutely do it. I give you the tools to do it. I make it easier for you to do it. And the other thing is you must do it. We don't have an option today as a parent not to engage our kids online. If you don't, then you're going to be, at some point, you're probably going to be forced to, because you're going to have a problem. Your kid's going to have some relationship issues online. They're going to be dealing with viewing pornography online. They're going to be maybe having some inappropriate relationships online or sexting. Something's going to happen at some point down the road, and now you're going to get pulled into this digital world, and you're going to be kind of on your heels because you didn't establish your presence there earlier. And so that's kind of what I want to encourage parents and get them excited, maybe a little bit freaked out, but mostly excited about their child's digital work. So I want to call them to action. There's some real issues here. There's also great things. There's also things that they can encourage their child to be positive and do things online. But again, that's kind of, I think, part of the mentorship piece. And I love having like grandparents in my talks, and I have some grandparents come up like, yeah, I inherited my grandchildren. Essentially, I'm raising my grandchildren now, and I have a flip phone. So what do I do? And I know they can do it because they've come back and said this changed everything for us. We're getting involved. So I always tell parents, if you think you can't do it, I got some grandparents that'll tell you different, and it's something that's absolutely doable.
Well, tell me more about how you get parents and grandparents excited about this. Because I think it's whenever we approach a big thing, it's so much easier to go in with a sense of excitement than a sense of reluctance.
I know every parent says, I really wish my kid would open up to me more. I've never heard a parent say, you know what, I'm good. Every parent's like, I want to know more about my kid. I want to be more available. I want to be there for them. And there's probably no better place than their digital world. So there's a huge upside. Obviously the safety stuff is huge, but there's a huge upside to being aware and being present for your kid in that world.
Yeah. So putting this into practice, how does a parent, what are some, steps that a parent could take to connect with their kid online and to learn more about them?
Well, so it really begins with a conversation, and it's an ongoing one. I tell parents you're having one conversation with your child that's going to go on for 15 years or whatever it is. It doesn't really end. It's going to change as they get older. So the conversation that you have about social media and the internet but it's going to encompass a lot of things. It's going to be relationships. It's going to be kids are using social media to purchase drugs now. So all of these things are all kind of intersecting here. But having that conversation with them and doing it in a way that your kid is going to be less defensive and more open to you. So let me give parents a huge tip. So I was one of the things that I did when I was on the sheriff's department was I was on the hostage negotiation team. So my job was to talk to people who were like inside a building surrounded by police and they don't want to come out. So it's kind of I'm dealing with a pretty hostile situation, a person who doesn't want to listen to me. Like, and sometimes parents feel like, yeah, I know what that feels like. I have a teenager. I know exactly what you mean. So what I've trained and what I learned was that the more you ask questions, exploring what they think, the better responses you get. And more likely you are to get somebody who's gonna, and what we law enforcement call it, generating voluntary compliance. So I would be asking if you're talking to your kid about sexting, let's say, or marijuana or something like that, I would say, so what's going on with, like, what do you think is the issue here? What do you see this as a problem? Why are people doing it? I mean, and don't say like, why do you think? People are like, what do you think generally, kind of like what students think about this? Is it a big deal? Have a lot of open-ended questions where you sound like, this is important, it sounds like you're generally curious and you're not interrogating them. So that's and those conversations can come up organically, and they should, frankly. Stopping your kid and saying, hey, we need to have a conversation about this is probably not the best setup. But looking for opportunities, because there are going to be some. You're going to see something on TV and turn to your kid like, hey, what do you think about that? So have this conversation, ask a lot of questions, and likely your kid's going to land on the right answer. So more questions, and being a sincere listener, I think, is really the key here for parents to make a difference. Because as soon as you tell them what you think, they're going to get defensive. Or if they ask you, like if they come back to you like, well, what do you think, mom or dad? Then can say, well, I think this would be reasonable. What do you think? And then throw it back. I'm like, what do you think? So having that conversation, treating your child like you would treat somebody that you work with that you respected. Think of it that way, because you can be very authoritarian, and sometimes you have to be. I've had situations where kids were having inappropriate relationships with adults online, and that was found out. And we're sitting down with this kid, and so now there's not an option. Like, this relationship is over. I'm sitting down as a law enforcement officer. I'm sitting down with the parent and that kid, and so we're not going to talk that out. So there may be situations where you have to say, this is not safe. We can't do this anymore. Yeah. But for the most part, I think establishing kind of policies for your home and how your child should be using the internet. One thing I give parents is my contract. So you can download this off my website. It's also in my book. It's a list of it's a conversation. So you basically, you read each line of the contract to your kiddo. So the first line of the contract is like, I will not share my name, address, telephone number, or parent's name with anyone I meet on the computer. Then you ask your kid, why do you think that's a good idea? What could happen if you did that? Just have a conversation. Work your way down the contract. It gives you all the things you need to really cover, but you're covering it in a way where you're having a conversation. And then maybe the last thing I can share with parents that's super powerful, not the last thing, but on this particular topic, is you need to open a door for your kid to come to you and ask for help. Your kid's afraid. If they come to you and they say, hey, I'm having a problem on this device that you bought me, this $1,000 phone, I'm having a problem. Our gut knee-jerk reaction as a parent is to take it away. Your kid knows that's exactly what's going to happen. So they're going to hide it, whatever's happening, and suffer and in silence. And there's been surveys, 90% of kids who are victims of online abuse do not go tell mom and dad for this very reason. So how do we turn that around? How do we change this perception? And actually in the contract, it says, if I make a mistake or see something inappropriate, I will tell my parent as soon as possible. Then you tell your kid, look, you're a kid and you're going to blow it. And when you do, I will not be shattered. I'm expecting it to happen because I was a kid and I made bad choices. It's inevitable. But because I care about you so much, and this is so important, if it happens, if you come to me as soon as you possibly can and you just tell me the truth, you just lay it out there. I'm promising I'm not going to judge you. I'm not going to yell at you. I'm not going to berate you. I'm going to listen to you. And then I'm going to help you. I'm going to help you try to figure this out. And I'm promising I'm not going to take it all away. In fact, I'm promising you I'm not even going to discipline you. I'm going to help you. So if you say that, then you have to follow through, because one day your kid's going to show up and tell you something that may explode the top of your head. So you got to remain calm and follow through and help your kid manage that situation. And sometimes you're just in like crisis, like mode, right? Or helping your kid if it's, or maybe you have to go to law enforcement, whatever. But your kid needs to know that no matter what the circumstance is, that you are 1,000,000% the safe person. And when I did this with my boys, I talked to them again as they got older. When they were moving into high school, same conversation, it changed. I said, look, 2 o'clock in the morning, if you're at a friend's house spending the night and 2 o'clock in the morning, mysteriously you end up at another home, like maybe you got teleported there. I don't know. You ended up in a home that you weren't supposed to be at that night, and there was a party and maybe drinking, and you feel like you can't safely get home. 2 o'clock in the morning, you call me. I'm making a promise. I'm going to show up. You're going to get in the car. I'm going to say two things. I love you. Let's go home. That's it. We go home and we'll talk about it calmly the next day. And I promise I'm not going to blow up on you. I'm not going to take it all away. We're going to talk about it calmly because things happen. And the bottom line is, I just wanted you to get home safely. Your child will not know any of this unless you open that door. And we have to do that.
Yeah. And so it's not only in the moment you're saving your child, but you're keeping that door open for the future so that if something like this ever happens again, they'll have that safe space to go to and return to. When you talk to students, what is your central idea?
So I can tell you right now what doesn't work. Shaking your finger at them and telling them, do this, don't do this. That does not work. And in fact, we know it doesn't work because the Just Say No to Drugs campaign, back when I was a kid, in the Reagan administration, it was a while ago, that didn't work. In fact, I think maybe drug use actually went up slightly. But what does work? Talking to kids in a way that they feel like you respect them. You're not talking down to them. And when I start my presentation, I say, you know what? I'm not going to tell you something you probably don't already know. Like, they already know all the things. If you ask a kid a safety question about online, they give you the right answer. They know. The problem is that when they're online, they do something that's quite contrary to what they believe to be true and safe. So I kind of juxtapose this idea of sharing your personal information with if an adult man walked up to you and wanted to ask, like, where you live, where you go to school, what's your phone number, can I look at your phone? Kids are like, that's crazy. I would not share that information with them. I go, okay, so let me ask you this. Do people fake who they are online for the purpose of hurting you? And they're like, yes, absolutely. I've never had a student say that doesn't happen. They're all like, yes, that absolutely happens. Okay. So if you have hundreds of followers and you're telling me that on average, like there's 70, 80, 90% of them are people you don't know, and you've led them in based on an image that looks good to you, but at the same time knowing that it could be anybody. But then at the same time, you're telling me that it's not safe to share that information with that person, that adult person. Do we have a problem? So in other words, it's not safe to do it face to face, but we're doing it online. And then I kind of propose, is this a problem? And I'll have a gymnasium full of 1,000, 800, whatever, high school students, and you can hear a pin drop. And slowly they start shaking their head like, yeah, this is a problem, because it's the fundamental problem. We can't have bullying, threats, and sexual exploitation if we're only dealing with people we know and trust. It just doesn't happen. So at least not in my experiences and all the hundreds of investigations I've done. So the problem here is this, fundamentally. When we look at a screen, that feels different than looking at someone's face. When we're face to face with somebody, that experience is very different than a screen experience. Everybody agrees this is true. And so I asked the students, why do you think this is the case? And ultimately we come to this conclusion that the real world and the digital world feel like two different worlds. So then what the change is, well, are they actually, they feel different. I agree 1,000,000%, but are they different? Talking to that person, sharing your personal information with that adult, wherever, face to face, you're saying that's not safe. But if you were online and you did the exact same thing, because you are, right? You're sharing who you are, where you live, where you go to school, picturing your friends. Is that equally unsafe? And they're all like, yes. Okay. So now we can all confidently say that they're actually the same thing. They feel different. And this is the trap. This gets kids in trouble. This gets adults in trouble. This is fundamentally the problem. So then from there, I start telling stories about an investigation where I had this person who was impersonating a young, cute girl. gets thousands of students in Orange County to friend her into Instagram, Snapchat, manipulates literally hundreds of high school boys to send her nude images. It turns out it was really this guy. And what's hilarious is when I do the reveal, when I show the profile image of the girl, and then it reveals it kind of morphs into the guy, they all laugh. They think it's hilarious. And I say, did I surprise you? Did you see this coming? They're like, yeah, 1,000,000% we saw this coming. Like, as soon as we saw that picture, we knew it was going to be a catfishing situation. Like, okay, perfect. Every one of those boys, hundreds of them who did this, knew what you know. Before they did this, they would have been sitting in this audience saying the exact same thing as you, but they did it anyway. So you may be sitting there thinking this could never happen to me, but I'm telling you something, these boys are you. So if you believe that the real world and the digital world are the same world, then everything changes. Everything, what we do online. The problem, it's not purely cognitive with kids, is it? Their prefrontal cortex, the decision-making part of the brain, not well developed, not until your late 20s. So they're really relying on dopamine and the limbic part of their brain, what makes them feel good. So what makes you feel good is having a lot of people saying that you're special and awesome and beautiful, and it's exciting, and someone sending you a naked picture, and then you send them a naked picture. It's all very exciting and dopamine producing. So kind of wrapped up in this situation is an adolescent brain. So it just makes everything really complicated for kids. And they literally get one chance to make the right choice. And that's why parents who walk out of my presentation say, man, am I glad there was no internet when I was a kid. But of course, their kids are them with the internet. So that's the problem.
And we don't get that opportunity to just say, I wish, and then the wish comes true. We have to parent with the internet. You said that during your parent seminars, you give a 4-part plan. Can you tell me more about that?
Yeah, so I call it the Cyber Safety Cop plan, basically it's you. The number one is talk to your kid. The most important safety factor in your child's life is a parent who stops and sits down with their kid and has conversation. So we talk about the contract, which I think is maybe the number one tool. We talk about how to talk to your kid about pornography. That's spelled out in the book. We talk about talking to your kid about sexting. We talk to your kid about the consequences of mean or threatening messages. So how do you talk to your kid about that? Which we also cover in the student presentation, student assembly, and then the number two is parental controls. So if you're a parent and you've tried to do this, you realize they weren't thinking about you when they created these parental controls. Because if they were, whoever created them, there would just be one big glowing red button. You'd press it and magically everything would be fixed. But it's not like that. You got to drill down into the settings. And in my book, like I said, I have all those pictures of what you need to do with the little finger pointing at press this, go through the whole thing. And when I got done with the new iOS, the iPhone operating system settings, it was literally like 27 separate things you have to do to properly set your child's phone up with screen time and everything, all the safety features. So it's overwhelming. So I don't want parents to give up. And hey, you know what? Most parents don't know that you can turn on parental controls and privacy settings for their Xbox and for their Chromebook and all that stuff. So we cover all of that. We also talk specifically about apps and parental controls there as well. So that's number two. Number three is screen time balance. So studies have shown that the more time children spend on social media, including Instagram or Meta, their own internal research shows that the more time children spend on their app, Instagram, the more likely they are to feel sad about their lives, more likely to think about hurting themselves, more likely to have eating disorders, especially if you're a young girl. And so all those things are kind of wrapped up there. So I'm not saying that children shouldn't be on screens, because I think They have to be. They're on screens all day at school. So I don't think screens necessarily are bad, but it's like a diet. So sweet, they're like dessert, right? If that's all you ate, yes, you would survive, but you wouldn't be very healthy. So I think I like to see it more of it this way. I'm not we all need to be in a cabin in the woods with no internet. I think we need to be reasonable about the amount of time our kids are online. And if your kid is active, playing outside, in sports, they got a lot of homework they got to do, then, I think giving them a couple hours a night of just kind of fun screens. Or for my kids, they wanted more time on the weekends because their friends come over, they want to play shoulder to shoulder on the Xbox or something, which is great. So I said, well, okay, if you want more time on the weekends, we have less time on the school nights. Actually, they came up with this idea. I said, well, what do you think would be fair? I used my Jedi mind trick with them, my hostage negotiator idea. I said, what do you think would be fair? Right? If you want more time, they're like, and my boys, without me prompting, said, we'll go 0 Xbox on, because that's kind of what they want to do, 0 Xbox on school nights and have essentially unlimited Xbox on the weekends. And I said, okay, I'll go, how do we know? This is another thing you need to ask your kid. How will we know if this isn't working? Like, what do you think would be reasonable? What's the benchmark here? And my kids were like, all right, we know it's not working if I'm bugging you on a school night to be on the Xbox. And we know it's not working if I'm not getting my homework done on the weekends or something like that. I'm like, okay, that sounds really reasonable to me. So let's give it a shot. And it worked out well because on the weekends they have football or basketball. Their friends come over, they play a little bit on the Xbox, and they want to go shoot some hoops. So it wasn't like incessantly happening on the weekends with the Xbox, but it definitely created a situation where there was less fighting in my house over this, because that was often an issue. Like I don't want to get off the Xbox. I'm like, no, you got to go to bed. It's school night, so we don't have to worry about that. So that's an idea that might work for families. But so coming up with some screen time limits on your device, setting those up again aren't easy, but I walk you through that, and then the quality, right? The quality of what they're doing. So like I said, screen time for school is different than screen time on YouTube or TikTok. And then number 4, lastly, is accountability. So number 1, you need to be involved in your child's digital world. So I talk about this in the presentation. I give you guys some examples on how to do that in the book. I walk you through it, but very basically, if your child has a social media app, you should have that social media app on your phone. I highly recommend installing an app on their device to help you monitor what you're doing. I love Bark, and I know, or setting them up with a phone that helps you monitor what's going on. I'm a big proponent of Pinwheel. I think it's especially. I tell parents if you're thinking about giving your child their first phone, I wish I had the Pinwheel phone back in 2000, whatever it was, when I gave my boys their first phone. I gave them an Android phone because I felt like I could better control what was going on there through using apps like Bark, but Pinwheel is that and more. Plus, it works really well with Bark as well. So you should have some accountability. You should be present. Use some technology to help you monitor, set up permissions and restrictions through that technology. Makes things easier for you. And then, at night, that device does not belongs anywhere but their room. I can tell you, I don't know how many hundreds of times where we had bullying, crazy things happening at a school, and I'm investigating it because sometimes there's threats involved. So there might be a criminal threat. We take a look at the messaging, and there's messages being said at 2:00 in the morning, 3:00 in the morning. And so apparently these children have the devices in their room. So what I've noticed is that bad choices on devices typically happen. They can happen anytime, but more often when you have a device behind a door that's closed, lights out, and a bored kid. If you have those 3 things, you're probably going to have bad choices. You can't control a bored kid. but you can control the other two things. Don't have it behind a door in their bedroom with the lights out. So that's something we can absolutely control. So I would park every night. My son would hand me his phone. I'd park it on a charging pad in my bedroom, and then I'd hand it to him in the morning. Actually, both my boys. So that's how we handled things all the way through high school. It wasn't, they have, now they're in college, they have total control of their phones. So that's ended. But up until that point, till literally the day they graduated high school, that's how we did things in my home. And it worked. And they grew up doing this. So, they probably didn't have a reason to gripe about it. And then, and so
hopefully turned into sticky behavior. Now that they're in college, they can, that's the goal, right? Is for them to continue to keep that good habit of not using their phone in the middle of the night.
Yeah. And I want to encourage parents. So a lot of parents cave, right? Because it's easier probably just to say, okay, whatever. Like one of the things I don't advocate parents letting their children have Snapchat. I don't think it's safe for any kid. I wrote more search warrants for Snapchat than every other platform combined. And just the feature of that disappearing imagery or video feature is very enticing for kids to make choices on there that probably aren't safe or aren't appropriate. So I never let my boys have it, even though they desperately wanted it, especially in high school. So my youngest, Zachary, when we were last year, we were visiting. He's his first year in college this year. We were visiting a college over last summer, and we were walking around the campus and talking to the counselors and so forth. So he's thinking about the next step, right? The next step in his life, and that he's moving away, and everything's gonna be very different. And we're driving home. And on our drive home, we're talking about my work, cyber safety cop, and he's like, et cetera. And he looks over at me and he says, "Dad, I just want to say thank you for saying no to Snapchat." And from a kid who pleaded and cajoled and just was very upset that his dad said no to Snapchat all his 4 years in high school, I nearly crashed into a car. I couldn't believe I was hearing what he was saying. And I said, "Well, why? Thanks, Zach. But what are you saying?" He goes, "You saved me from so much drama in high school." And he goes, and it wasn't until I was on this college campus and I was looking around and I realized that all those people in high school, I'm never going to see them again. I mean, maybe." He goes, "But I'm not going to be in communication." I realized that all that stuff happening on social media in high school didn't matter. It was a bunch of nonsense. It was a waste of time. And maybe I have a handful of friends that I will stay in touch with, and he does. But he goes, all those people, he goes, I just don't think that's going to be important in my life anymore. So I think every kid at some point, and maybe it has to do with their brain development, but every child, I think that sooner or later, they're going to come to this realization. And if a parent who sticks to their guns and makes good choices for their kid, and sometimes making their child sad because they didn't get what they wanted, you will be vindicated. So I would like to encourage you to do that. If you don't think that's safe for your kid, then you make a good choice for your kid. I always say in my presentations, my job as a parent is not to make my child happy in every situation. My job is to raise, in my case, 2 boys, and I'm raising them to be men. I'm raising them to be a good boyfriend. I'm raising them to be a good husband, and I'm raising them to be a good father. That's my job. And I want to encourage parents that one day, even though the road to that place may be bumpy, your child will come to that realization.
Well, that's inspiring. I think we can all live vicariously through your moment with your son, Zachary.
Hang in there.
Stick to our guns, hoping that that's the outcome that we'll all meet. Well, thank you so much for all of this information today. I feel like some of the key takeaways for me are speaking to our kids. Speaking to our kids is a key takeaway, right? Having that conversation door wide open. But when we speak to them, just being really active listeners and talking to them from a place of curiosity instead of, there's a time and place for that authority to come into play. But I think for the most part, especially if things are going well, as long as we're curious with our kids, they'll not only have a better conversation with us, but I think it'll also instill a sense of curiosity in them so that they can approach all of these difficult topics with their own questions in mind.
Indeed. Yeah, for sure.
All right. Well, thank you again. I appreciate your time today.
Yeah, thank you. And if parents want to know more about me and what I'm doing, and perhaps if they want me or one of my instructors to come speak at their school, talk to their kids or talk to them, they can find out more on my website at cybersafetycop.com.
All right. And that does it for season 2. I'll start prepping for season 3 though. So if you have any challenges parenting with tech, I want to try to help by working with an expert on the topic. Just email me at Julie, Julie, @pinwheel.com. This episode, as well as the whole of season 2 of Screen Time Stories, was produced by me. Thank you to everyone that listens and subscribes. You moms and dads are absolutely killing it by taking the extra time to listen and try to be a good parent.